Welcome to the Teen Life Podcast, where we believe that teenagers are not a problem to be solved. We're here to help you equip teenagers through the power of connection. Hey guys, my name is Chris Robey, and back at it with me is Karlie Duke.
Hello.
Good to see you guys today. Good to be back on the podcast. And today our topic is a pretty difficult one, a heavier one, but we felt like with Thanksgiving coming up and all the, and just even the holidays where food is front and center and we're talking about food, what's your favorite foods and all that kind of stuff. We wanted to talk through overeating disorders and what that could look like and what you might want to be looking for with your teenager.
Yeah, so Chris and I were kind of talking before we even started that I know there are more eating disorders than just these two, but I kind of wanted to break them up. It seemed like a lot to do it all in one podcast episode. And I think with Thanksgiving coming up, I really wanted to talk about this idea of overeating disorders. And so there are two that we're mostly going to focus on today, which are binge eating and then bulimia. And I think these two go well together because they really kind of start the same, and which is they both start with binge eating. And what's really scary, I think, as I was kind of looking into the facts, Chris, is that binge eating disorder is something that is very widespread. Boys and girls can have it. It's one of the most common eating disorders. And I saw a stat that said about 4 million people in the United States have this disorder.
It's a lot. My goodness. I didn't realize there's that many.
Yeah. And a lot of times it appears in teenagers and young adults. So if you have teenagers, this is when this eating disorder might show itself for the first time. But what binge eating actually is eating large amounts of food, much more than you need in one sitting. But I feel like everyone can think of probably a time that they've done that, where they've sat down to a big meal. Thanksgiving is a great example, and ate more than you needed. But when it becomes an eating disorder is when it happens at least once a week over 3 months or more, and they can't stop doing it.
So once a week over 3 months or more.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
So it's more of a habit. They often eat very quickly. They eat when they're stressed or upset instead of just hungry. A lot of times there's this sense of like loss of control. They can't stop eating even when they feel uncomfortably full, like they'll just keep going. And as a result, obviously this can lead to like guilt and shame or like feeling really bad about themselves after they've binged.
And you would think this would be only for the overweight. You would see the evidence of that binge eating, but our research shows that this could really be any kind of body type or health condition. Someone could definitely suffer from this kind of eating disorder.
Mm-hmm. And I will say this eating disorder, it seems like it's just a food problem, but so often it's not. There's something else going on that they might not even realize is causing them to overeat, or they might be avoiding something, or there's something difficult in their life going on. And people with a binge eating disorder are also more likely to have mental health problems like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, ADHD. So it could be like, I think sometimes we think eating disorder, we need to see like a dietitian, and that could be helpful, but you also might need to get them other help as well.
And someone who's binge eating might eat a lot of food quickly. Maybe hide food containers or wrappers in their room. Maybe have big changes in their weight, maybe way up, way down, but just their physical appearance changes quite a bit. They might skip meals, eat at unusual times, like late at night when no one else is eating, and because of that, maybe just eat alone. They might have a history of eating in response to emotional stress, like family conflict, peer rejection, or school problems. We joke about, comfort food or, eating my feelings kind of thing. But, that is a typical, if things are stressful or difficult, and that's a stress response is to eat and eat a lot. there might be something going on there for sure.
Yeah. And I kind of want to like transition into bulimia. You're going to see probably a lot of the same signs. I'll talk about kind of in a little bit some other signs that can go along with bulimia. But people with bulimia binge eat, but then they try to make up for that overeating by throwing up. They might use laxatives or they might overexercise to lose weight. And so they do not want to gain weight by overeating. And so they'll binge eat, they'll overeat, they'll feel that guilt or shame. And then usually they do something about it to purge, is the word that's usually used around that, which, like I said, could be throwing up. It could be using medication to help them go to the bathroom quicker, stuff like that.
Right. Unlike people with anorexia, which we'll talk about anorexia like on another podcast more specifically, but people with bulimia might be thin, average weight, or overweight. So anorexia really does present more as very underweight, very thin, but bulimia might not be as evident.
Exactly. And people with bulimia often like hide their eating and purging. This isn't something that they're probably going to talk about. And I think I was telling Chris before we started, this one really scares me because there are a lot of health problems that are caused by vomiting or using like excessive laxatives or diuretics. Some are low blood pressure, irregular heartbeats. They're going to feel tired, weak, dizzy, faint. There might be blood in their vomit or their stool, tooth erosion, like lots of cavities. They also might have swollen cheeks from their like salivatory glands. And so there are just like a lot of health problems that come with this, which obviously no eating disorder is good, but it's something to look out for. And like I said, the signs are going to be very similar to the ones that Chris kind of said for binge eating, but they might also go to the bathroom after they eat. If they like constantly are carrying around a toothbrush or toothpaste or gum to like cover up um, that like smell of them throwing up, or if your child is taking supplements that you don't know what they are, that might be a good reason to ask questions and kind of figure out what's going on.
And this one, unless you're really paying attention, might be harder to spot for sure. You might just see the overeating side of it, but with like lots of disorders where there is shame or guilt or, attempt to hide, those who are suffering from this might get really good at hiding it. And I was talking with Karlie before this. I've got a really good friend who dealt with this, and I would have never known if they hadn't reached out and shared, their illness with me, and I was really shocked. It was something that I hadn't seen coming, and so those who do suffer from this sometimes really get good at suffering in silence. And so these can be pretty hard to spot unless you're really there and you're seeing what's going on.
Right. Now, I have some tips, and these come more in the way of tips for your teen, or if you know someone who is struggling with an eating disorder, like these are tips for them. Hopefully, they give you some things to talk about, ask questions, like we always talk about in this podcast. If you kind of are like, I'm wondering if there's something going on, it's always better to ask than ignore it and have a conversation. But for our teenagers or people who might be struggling with binge eating disorders, some tips: it's important to not skip meals. Sometimes you might see that there's guilt because they overate, and so they'll skip a meal, and then at dinner they're starving because they haven't eaten all day, and then they binge again and start that whole cycle over. Mindful eating is really important, so paying attention to what you eat, noticing when you feel full. There's lots of research on that, and that might be a podcast for another day too, Chris, but not eating in front of the TV or with your phone, but like really taking time to like sit down with people, sit at a table and eat and be mindful of what you're doing.
And just with that mindfulness of what they eat, that, it's good nutrient dense food, right, that will actually fill them up. And but also not be kind of junk food that's really easy to binge on. And so being very mindful of the diet that, you're eating good food that's going to, keep you satiated a long time.
Mm-hmm. I think also identifying triggers. So if there's something that triggers binge eating, maybe it's eating around other people or when you are alone, knowing those things so you can kind of avoid or manage them. Being active, we talked, I can't remember now if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, but we talked about exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And being active can also be a great way to kind of channel that energy.
And I think, as we talked about, this overeating is a coping mechanism, right? So it's a way of dealing with strong emotions in an unhealthy way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so finding healthy ways to express, to cope with those strong feelings, expressing through music, art, dance, writing, something to get what's inside out.
Yeah.
Talking to a friend or trusted adult, trying yoga, meditation, or just taking a couple deep breaths to relax, which we're going to talk about breathing in our next episode, just how important, how we breathe, but we don't really breathe very well. And so talking about how just finding healthier ways of coping and just being able to identify that the unhealthy behavior is a coping mechanism, and we replace unhealthy coping mechanisms with healthy ones to be successful. And so,
Right.
and then I think along with that too is, and I think especially if you since this is a big issue out the gate, is to get professional help, getting a professional to help talk through whatever, probably a couple. One is, a mental health professional under the care of your physician, but also to nutritionists, people who can kind of help work that out. And I just know, having worked with a few that have dealt with this before, there has to be some willingness on behalf of the student to do this, because they feel very attacked and very like they're doing a lot of things wrong. And there has to be some relationship building through the whole process to know that you as the parent are not going anywhere. You're there to support them through what's going to be probably a tough recovery, but knowing that this recovery has to happen for a healthy, long life to happen.
Right. And I will post these links, but there is an NEDA helpline, which I think is the National Eating Disorder Association, if I'm remembering right. But they have support, they have resources, treatment options. And so if you don't even know where to start, that could be a really good resource. There are volunteers that are trained to help you find the information that you need, where you're from. And so if you know your teenager has an eating disorder and are kind of overwhelmed, like, I don't know what to do, they can call that helpline, or you can call that helpline and get help as well. And so have conversations, especially going into this holiday season. Let's really try to frame what we eat in a healthy way with teenagers. For the trend this week, Chris, it's been a little while, but let's talk teen terms.
It has been a while, and I'm excited.
You always love this one, Chris,
I
don't you?
do.
You
This
learn
one makes me
so
look.
many
It
things.
just makes me look really in touch.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great word. So first, this one is more of an acronym. And I want to talk about the acronym, but also the word, because people might not even know what the word is. But sometimes you'll see TW on posts, especially like social media posts, TikTok videos, stuff like that. Do you know what that is, Chris?
TW.
Yes.
I've seen it, but I don't think I know what it is.
Okay, so TW is most often, I suppose it could be used for something else, but is trigger warning.
Ah.
And so that is when the author or poster is letting you know, like, hey, there's something in this post that could be triggering for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be violence, it could be talking about even something like eating disorders or pregnancy loss or domestic abuse. Like if someone is talking about something that could bring up feelings that you're not ready to face, they'll kind of give a trigger warning and kind of let you know, like, hey, proceed at your own risk.
I feel like I've seen people post trigger warnings that when you read it, like that's not really a trigger warning. It's more of a, hey, read my post,
Yeah.
I think sometimes it could be misused for sure. And I get people are trying to be mindful and conscientious of others' experiences, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, for another acronym, and then we'll get to some more terms, W or L, I feel like I'm seeing being used a lot on social media as well, which could be win or lose or loss.
Okay.
And so like that's a W would be, that's a win. Or that's an L for him. That's a loss for him.
Well, there's entire social media accounts built on this premise where it's like dudes posting their W's or dudes posting their L's.
Yeah.
And it's it's, of course the W's are, good, feel good, stuff, but the L's are brutal. Just some of the stuff that people post like, oh, that's horrible. For sure.
Well, and you might hear someone say something like, I took a lot of L's today. And so that could be used in that context as well. So I feel like you're seeing it on social media, but you're also hearing it more in conversation now as well. Now, green flags. I don't know if we've talked about flags at all, Chris. So we might have to back up. But if you had to guess what a green flag is
it opposite of red flag?
Yes.
It is.
Good job. Yes. So
red flags, I mean, that's been around a long time. But
yes. So if you have a red flag, it's something that would make you kind of go, oh, I don't know about that person, especially in terms of dating is mostly where this is used. But it could be used for friendships as well. If that's a red flag for that person, if they have anger issues or, I don't know, if they're an adult and still living at home with their mom, like that could be a red flag. And green flags are the opposite of that. So that could be something that you are like, oh, that's a really good quality of they treat other girls right. Or for a girl, if she likes watching football, that's a green flag. And so I feel like I'm seeing that more of like, look for someone with green flags. I will say I was looking this up on Urban Dictionary because I knew what it meant, but it's always fun to look it up on Urban Dictionary. And I did see a post that basically said people with green flags aren't always as attractive as people with red flags because you don't have anything to fix, which is just a sad reality sometimes of our
I don't think I like
culture and world. But be cool and hip and ask if that guy has any green flags with your daughter, or ask questions about what kind of flags they're seeing. And people around them, they'll love that, I'm sure.
Yep.
Now, this one I had to look up, Chris, because I did not know this. And I saw a TikTok on it recently and I was like, oh my. But Body Shop.
You got me on this one. I've never heard. I haven't seen this one.
So there is a Sam Smith song called Unholy that's been pretty big, and it's been trending on TikTok and on Reels as a sound. And he sings about going to a body shop, doing something unholy. And I saw this TikTok by a teacher that some of her class, like kids in her class, were asking her if she had been to the body shop. And she was like, sure, like for my car. And they like all started giggling, and she was like, hang on. And so I also looked it up. In that context, body shop is a strip club.
Oh.
So I haven't necessarily seen a ton of teens using this. But like I said, if you're kind of wondering if that's a song that they're listening to, it's talking about going to a strip club.
Okay.
And so that's something good to know. And maybe your teen doesn't know it and they just like the song, but that's a good conversation to be having.
Absolutely.
With them, I feel like. And you don't want to get caught like that teacher did, not knowing what they're talking about and just answering, sure, I've been to a body shop.
Yeah.
Now, finally, slay. So not like a Christmas sleigh, like
SLAY.
SLAAY.
Yeah.
I almost said W.
Right.
Slaw.
Yeah. I've heard this used, probably not in the way that teenagers are using it, but it can be used a lot of different ways, can it?
Mm-hmm. It can. So if you did something really good, like, hey, you slayed that,
Mm-hmm.
it could also be used if someone is looking hot or sexy, like slay girl.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. It really can be used for anything in context. It's one of those that's hard to know unless they're saying it. I suppose you could say they're slaying, but I hear more slay than other versions of that. And so that is one that you might hear your teenager ask. And that could be a good one to ask, like, hey, what do you mean by that?
Right. You mean a lot of things. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I'll just put this in here. If you are hearing a word or a term that you're like, hey, I'm not really sure what this is and want us to cover it, please shoot us a direct message on Instagram or Facebook, or send us an email, comment on any of our posts, reach out. We're always trying to gather these teen terms. So if your teen is saying something, you're like, hey, I have no idea what's going on, let us know and maybe we'll cover it next time. For the tip, Chris, I recently saw an Instagram post and I thought this was really cool, and just kind of wanted to mention it because it might be a good idea. But the Instagram post said, my dad once wrote a note to use and put it in a drawer. The note said, if you're scared to tell me something, just bring me this note as a reminder that I'm here to support you. I won't get mad. I will work with you on a solution. And the post kind of said, like, this is a great way to keep your kids talking to you. And I just thought it was a cool reminder because, like, obviously it would be in the handwriting of that dad. And so when he sees that note, it's a good reminder of, like, okay, take a deep breath. We're going to remain shock proof. We're going to have a conversation and really get them the help that they need without reacting out of anger or frustration or in the moment. And I just really thought that was a really cool way to tell your kids, like, hey, I'm giving you permission to come talk to me about anything.
Yeah. So a way to kind of remind yourself in the future of like, hey, you did tell me you would be cool about this and talk to me, and to have it in your own handwriting, handing it to you would be super powerful, and a reminder that, my priority is that we talk and that I'm a safe place for you to talk. And I'm reminding myself that I said that as well.
Yeah. I love that. So maybe that's something that you try with your teenagers this week, and just see if maybe that's helpful, and maybe keep a few notes just tucked around the house that they can go find and use. And with that, that's a wrap on this episode. But we want you to continue to subscribe and listen to our podcast episodes. Follow us on social media. Kelly does a great job of putting really good resources out for you. And sometimes we talk about behind the scenes stuff in our stories. So go follow us, review us in your favorite podcast app. That really helps other people find us and be able to listen as well. And another great way to do that is to share this with a friend. So if you know a friend who maybe is struggling, or their teen is struggling, especially with an eating disorder, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, that would be a great way to share and be like, hey, I am with you and I'm supporting you. Let me know if I can do anything to help. And with that, we'll see you next week.